Good evening. Welcome to Open Up Live Talk Show. My name is Dipesh. I'm the social media coordinator at Voice of Men 360. Voice of Men 360 is a nonprofit organization founded in 2020 and is based in Toronto, Canada. Voice of Men 360 was born out of the need for seeing a tremendous need and stepping up to provide services, help, and support for boys and men. We are part of International Men's Day. International Men's Day has been serving for over 25 years and globally over 90 countries around the world. International Men's Day follows six pillars, which is the overall well-being of boys and men, and we follow in the same footsteps as International Men's Day. Why open up? Because men do not open up their hearts or willing to share their matters with anyone. When we keep our emotional challenges within for a long time, at some point they do explode and cause health issues. This is why we want to create a safe space and an open space to allow an individual to share their life journey through our platform. We aim to create awareness about life challenges, struggles, overcoming up and down that our boys and men go throughout their lives. There's no limitation with gender, age, nationality, ethnic group. In sharing your life journey, all are welcome to participate. Our goal is to make a positive impact on someone's life through this program. Open Up is on Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and we bring in an individual to each show to share their life experiences. Before I introduce our special guest for today, I would like to go through a disclaimer for Voice of Men 360. We would like to remind you that Voice of Men 360's mission is always delivered with good faith and peaceful harmony. The views and opinions expressed in today's episode are those of our speakers and do not represent Voice of Men 360. Our organization engages in discussion forums to offer inspiration and create awareness of issues of men who wish to overcome their life challenges. We are not providing medical or therapeutic advice. Should you require that type of assistance, we recommend you contact a medical professional. If you have any questions or concerns about today's episode or any Voice of Men 360 content, please email us at info@voiceofmen360.org. Today's speaker is Geoff Girvitz. Geoff is the host of the Dad Strength podcast and the founder of Bang Personal Training. Geoff believes in the power of presence for fathers and looks at fatherhood through the lens of health behaviors, mindfulness, and community. Welcome, Geoff, to Open Up Show, and thank you for joining us and being willing to share your life journey.
Thanks, Dipesh. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Jeff. Just to get started, what would you say, were some of the your life experiences that kind of made you, start the Band Personal Training, the Dad Strength podcast, and a lot of the awesome things you're doing today, especially when it relates to fatherhood?
Yeah, big question. I think, here. Well, let's pick a point in time.
Sure.
So I'm going to rewind first to just like at the end of the pandemic, or not. I don't know if we're out of the woods 100%, but the end of lockdowns in Toronto, and having a personal training studio was stressful. There was a lot of uncertainty, like other businesses and restaurants come to mind. We weren't sure if we were going to make it. And during that time, I began to ask myself, well, what is it I really want? And kind of engage in this thought experiment of, well, let's pretend that we're past all the worrying about everything, about whatever your version of success is, about whether it's finances or whatever else. And for me, just to say, what happens? Okay, here's your $1 billion. You never have to sweat money again. What do you want to do with your time? I don't see myself ever retiring or not wanting to work. It's just a question of what it is. And I kind of recognized, and we really saw this laid bare over the last few years, that people need support. They need relationships. I refer a lot to something called dimensions of wellness, which is a way of looking at health, not just through the physical lens, but through multiple lenses. And one of those is relational. What are our supports? What are our relationships? What are our networks? And I kind of felt like men needed, we all need, but kind of speaking for myself, we need sort of a relational healthcare network. can we reach out to people? Can we connect with them? And I think that's what you're doing here as well. Can we be vulnerable? Can we be honest about this stuff? And I think if we really want to, if we want to be active citizens, if we want to participate in this world, then we have to ask the question of what are we leaving for our kids, and how are we developing our kids? How are we nurturing them and supporting them, and enabling them to grow up to be uh, great critical thinkers, and able to emotionally regulate themselves and have the tools for success? Well, we're the ones, in the driver's seat when they're young, and we're taking an active role here. So I wanted to make sure that we're supporting fathers um, through this process. And so Dad Strength began initially as curiosity, as my desire to make sure I wasn't making any obvious mistakes as a dad, that I was doing everything I could. And as it's evolved, this project has been free and flexible enough to evolve. So I've just asked, well, what are the people I'm interacting with? What are their needs? What do they want? And from the podcast, I began having conversations with dads, and a lot of dads with ADHD. That's a particular interest of mine. And what I began to recognize was these men need community, and that's evolved into a weekly call. We do this on Zoom. We do some live meetups as well, and we get together. We talk about being dads, and often we'll talk about work, or relationships, or health, but it's always through that lens of trying to be intentional fathers.
That's amazing, man. Because I think what's missing from a lot of, like boys and men today is that sense of community and that sense of belongingness. Like if you look at like video games, internet use, it's pretty much like the highest it's ever been amongst men. And the
Mhm.
funny thing is, anytime I go out to like a library, or I go out to just any kind of like social or whatever, I'm like, where's all the boys? Like even at the playgrounds, I'm like, where's all the boys? It's all girls here, right? So that's amazing that you're building that sense of community. Um, Moving on to like the next question that kind of, I guess, maybe or maybe not relates to it. What would you say that there were some incidents that happened in your childhood, like say like 5, 10, or 15 years old, that are just growing up in general, that kind of inspired you to, be who you are today?
The first thing that comes to mind, and I think what shaped my career to be, was when I was 16, I guess. Um, I was not a particularly physically active kid, or at least I wasn't. I did love to ride my bike. I take that back, but I was not an athletic kid. I wasn't really coordinated. If I wasn't picked last on a team, I certainly was near the back. Um, and and I kind of recognized, wow, um, my body's got to be more than something to carry my brain around in. And I knew I wanted to do something. I didn't want to do a team sport. I wanted it to be more independent, and I became interested in martial arts. And I remember my dad taking me um, to my first lesson, and in spite of being absolutely terrible at it, I fell in love with it. And I would bike. I don't know how far it was, maybe 5 kilometers every day. I'd train for hours. I'd bike home, always full of energy, really full of excitement for it. And I remember thinking, this is the first thing that I've ever really worked hard at. I never liked school. I was never, like I said, into team sports. This is the first thing I really threw myself in wholeheartedly. And now looking back and connecting the dots and saying, okay, I know now I didn't have a diagnosis then of ADHD. I got that at 45. What I realized is that I had high needs for movement and fitness in order to function well and able to, you know, think clearly and concentrate and emotionally regulate. This is a really important thing. So I'll often say that people with ADHD have high needs for movement, for nature, and for meaning, right? All three, and so it ticked that box. And so although I never really thought of myself as a gym person in that sense. I moved to Toronto in 2002. I'd been living abroad. I immediately got back into martial arts, and I remember having this moment saying, wow, "This has been really important for me. This has been really important in my life." how am I going to keep this going? How am I going to make sure that I can keep moving and exercising when I'm in my 60s or my 70s or beyond? And I began to do what I do. I began to research and look into this stuff. And um, there wasn't a lot of information on general health. I mean, there's like the men's fitness sort of space or men's health, but I was looking at more academic work on strength and conditioning and athletic development. And I wouldn't, in a million years, I wouldn't have thought I would be interested in this, but I was fascinated. And this led me over the course of a number of years to open up a personal training studio here in Toronto. I opened it in 2008. And I think over that time, more and more, I have learned to shape a vision for what I think health is. And so fitness is super important, or we'll say health in general, physical health is super important, but often we are confused about how to approach it. There's so much conflicting information and complexity, and one of the big sort of riddles I've tried to untangle through my career and have really focused on is, why is it hard for us to do the things that we know are good for us and that we know will serve us? So a lot of what my work is breaking barriers down so people can do that.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. And especially like when you bring in ADHD and some of the other things, because even if I look at myself, like for me, like play is extremely important. Like could be like like I remember the gym class, I was just monkeying around and I kind of felt safe in that kind of environment. So definitely, I think I think that's as human beings, that's what we're built for, right? Is if you look at our ancestors, just like work, you work 7 8 hours in the field and then you get to eat. But today, the lifestyle we're living in, it's definitely very stressful emotionally, I would say, mentally stressful. And I was actually watching some videos on ADHD as well, and it's like, yeah, like the brains are wired a little bit differently. And like our schools, I don't know if it's changing now, but like I don't think our schools kind of appreciate that there's differences in learning, and you can't just do like a one size fits all, right? But yeah, definitely, I think movement is important, and same thing like growing up, I did like wrestling, did like working out. I love working out. It was like something that came to me naturally. You know what I mean? So, well, that's awesome, man. Moving on to another question. When it comes to, like fatherhood and like your relationship with your father, or positive role models that kind of shaped your upbringing, could you like talk a little bit about that? Like, could you share some like memories or experiences that you had with your father, or like positive role models that kind of inspired you or impacted you?
Yeah, I think about my dad. He passed away in 2013. Um, I think of I think of him in terms of health, both good stuff and bad stuff. And the good stuff was him modeling it. I remember when I was a kid, he would play squash and racquetball. He was active. He was always a big guy. He was always a strong guy, and he was known for that. Um, but I remember going and hanging out in gyms or biding my time in racquetball courts while he would play or compete. And when I was older, I would also ride horses with him. We went for a long time doing that. And as my dad got older, he became more sedentary, and he did wind up having a lot of health issues. And so, I was always sort of I was probably the most active person, physically active person in my family, that I know of. And I think that was just sort of a natural thing for me, and kind of recognizing that I had those needs. And so I'd seen the good part of that. The you know I think of being physically healthy and reasonably fit as a form of freedom. We often talk about freedom in the context of money, for example, the option to buy what you want, or work or not work when you want. But freedom is also very much a physical thing, a health thing, because if you wanted to take part in life in a physical way, if your friends were going on a challenging hike, or you wanted to go on a long bike ride, or I just took my son outside a few minutes ago. We just ran around the block a couple of times. not with a particular plan, not in a disciplined way. We weren't timing anybody or counting sets of reps. We're just doing it for the enjoyment of doing it and knowing that we would sleep better. And so I think of that as a form of freedom too, and sort of maintaining that ability. I saw my dad lose that as he got older and kind of succumb to health issues. So I'm very cognizant of that. There's sort of the really positive piece of life, where what are we going after? What are the things we're trying to create with intention? And then there's the I think a lot too as I get older about, well, I don't want to have huge regrets. I don't want to be on my deathbed, or I don't want to be sick, thinking to myself, I could have taken better care of myself. I could have done more. I didn't do some simple things. So a big part of that, influences how I think about health, and really how I structure that stuff professionally.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense, man. And I think, as I get older, I'm also realizing that, no one's perfect, especially like our family or fathers or positive or any role models, right? And everyone has their own traumas that they go through, and everyone has things that they go through. And then one thing you mentioned that kind of stood out for me was the definition of success, right? So, like for some people, success means money, right? And that was the case, like in my family. But then as I'm growing up older, it's like, okay, just because someone has money doesn't really mean that they're happy. So, like, what is success? And I think for me, like, success means happiness and freedom, regardless of what you have. So, and I think because if you're not happy, then how are you gonna help other people or help the community, right? And the funny thing is, I was looking at like this video on social media. It's like, what's the biggest financial mistake you can make? And the first thing that came was like, you know, shouldn't mental health be number one? Because if you don't have positive mental health, then how are you going to be able to make, positive decisions, right? So yeah, man, no, that's good to know. And then what do you like looking at society as is today? You have kids, and you work with dads and stuff like that. What would you say is the importance and the role of fatherhood in children's lives? Because I know today nowadays, like the definition of fatherhood and motherhood is kind of like intertwined, right? It's like, okay, one person can do everything, but what do you think, in your opinion, is the importance of like fatherhood?
Yeah, it's such a big question, and it's so wrapped up with the idea of what is it to be a man, or what is masculinity. And we're in a time period now where there's a lot of sort of back and forth between roles. Um, and so I would just say that for any human, the question is, well, what are your values? What are the things you believe in? We call these values or principles. And are you living in alignment with those things? I think that's one of the, I mean, for me personally, and I mentioned I'm a meaning driven person, but I think that's how you sort of minimize internal friction, right? When you're living in accordance with your beliefs, you're not saying, well, I'm let's say we want to over to index on money, which is a very sort of common conversation in this culture. Or if we're saying no to all these other things, to healthy relationships and to physical health, maybe emotional health, etc. What are we giving up? And that might create a lot of internal friction. I can say that, and having spoken with a lot of experts in the area, I think one of the great roles for fathers, and this is the maybe the one thing I say we can really sort of hold ourselves to, is um, the power we have and the role we have in physical play, and in challenging boundaries, right? There's some biological stuff, right? In the sense of, I'm not a fan. Usually, it's a big red flag when people start talking to me about the distinct differences between men and women. But what I can say, and whether that is a biological function or a social function, it is women that carry children and give birth to them, and for very understandable reasons, are more likely, in my experience, as validated by research, to be risk averse, to really be protectors. And it's the dads that are going to push boundaries and throw their kids way up in the air, right? And we've all got sort of our own boundaries for what is acceptable risk. But dads are going to be the ones that are pushing that are looking for physical play, that are wrestling, um, challenging boundaries. I took my son to jujitsu today, you know, because it's something I love. So I think our role there um, is so important, and that becomes very organically physical health. I am not a fan, even though I'm professionally in the world of health and fitness and exercise. I'm not a fan of giving kids regimented workouts and counting sets and reps and treating them like little adults. I think their job is to play and experience a great diversity of movement. And I think in our the way we relate, and I can definitely speak for myself, the way that I relate and enjoy my time most with my son is when we are engaged in active play. So I think not to put too fine a point on it, but that would be my answer.
Sounds good, man. And it's spot on. Like I'm reading a lot of developmental psychology, and I'm reading, I'm reading this book by Robert Bly. It's called Iron John. I
Sure,
don't know if
yeah,
you read it, right? Yeah.
yeah.
So
Years it when it came out, I read it. Yeah.
yeah, I'm reading about that, and it's like the importance of fatherhood is kind of you gotta push the child, especially it talks about boys, to push them out in the real world, um, as opposed to them being, staying, in that I mean, yeah, nurturing is important, and then in developmental psychology, you talk about like how mother's role is more important during the initial years, and then
Mm.
as the child grows older, the importance of fatherhood, and then other positive role models. So yeah, definitely, man. I mean, definitely rings true. And then um, the second last question here is that what do you think is something? I think we touched on this in the first question. What do you think is something that's affecting male mental health today? Yeah, maybe living in the modern society today, with the internet, social media, and just from what you've seen, what do you think are like some of the factors there?
The main place that I would look, or the first place I would look, is relationships and social support. I remember, and I think most of us have had this experience. Tell me if you had when you were in school, maybe everybody sat around and the teacher said, okay, everybody in class, I want you to write one nice thing about everybody else, one thing that you value, right? And everybody took turns, and they read, and you got, maybe 20 people told you something wonderful they saw, in you. And it's a really moving experience, and I believe that for a lot of people, that was the last time in their lives they heard unambiguously positive feedback. Not, "Here's a compliment just to, get you to calm down before I give you critical feedback," just to tell you what's great about you and to support you and to see you, and I think we need more of that. Um, the men's spa I'm so glad, um that you guys exist. There's when we get into the men's space, things can get dodgy, but there's room for just we can be solutions focused. We can be um, positive. We don't. It doesn't have to be reactive. And I think we all need more of that. That's why I host a community. I think that's why you do the same.
Yeah, of course, man. I think we definitely need more spaces that caters to men or male identifying people, persons, and I think that's what's missing today.
Mhm.
Because I grew up back in India, so over there in India, one of the biggest things in the culture that's ingrained is friendship. It's like no matter who you are, like you can talk to someone randomly down the street and they're your friend right away. But when
Mhm.
I came to Canada, like as a teenager, I kind of noticed that everyone is kind of like keep to themselves. I guess
Mhm.
there's that that this sense of distancing and then sense of like I guess being your own person. But yeah, man, I think relationships is good, and that's the thing. Like in our schools today, they don't talk about this stuff, right? They don't teach you
Mhm.
like they don't teach you life skills. They don't
Well,
teach you like
not
relationship
yeah.
skills.
Not
So
not to mention, I think it's so important that these relationships often happen in motion, and that's what I've been discovering when we meet together and we engage in exercise or movement. It's really important. And as sort of a student of physical culture, I can tell you that there's tremendous physical culture tradition in India, and I continue to learn about akaras um, and the tools for exercise. that come from India. Every culture has their own sort of touchstones for this. And what happened? People get together and they move around and they communicate, and then we just feel better when all of this is happening. And so my advice to anyone, I think, would be to seek out communities where you can combine that kind of positivity and that honesty and vulnerability with movement or some kind of health behavior, from a sauna to a bike or a run or a walk, whatever it is.
Awesome, man. Sounds good, Jeff. Thank you so much for being on the show. Last question: how can people reach out to you? Do you have any like social media or any emails, address, or website that people want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, the simplest way is to go to dadstrength.com. If they're interested in taking part in our weekly talks, they can find out there. And then I've got social media links and everything from the site.
Awesome. Sounds good, Jeff. Thank you so much for being on the show. Oh, I think I have
Yeah,
one
pleasure.
more last question come up today.
Yeah.
Um, from the audience here. So what does it mean to open up when it comes to you and other men, especially? Like, I guess opening up is, I don't think, when it comes to men, like, we live in a culture that says, oh, like feelings and all that stuff, like why are you being a girl, you know?
Mm.
And I think opening up takes courage, right? So how would you like push men to open up more?
The strongest people I know are the most honest about how they're feeling, are the most capable of saying, I love you, I value you, are the most capable of saying, I don't know, I need help. Like I'm stuck here or I'm not sure. So to me, if nothing else, it means um, both the skill and the courage of asking for support when you need it, and of course, giving it when you can.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you for joining and sharing your life journey with us today. Before we end our show, I just want to let the audience know that we do have a few live shows that are hosted by Voice of Men 360 on a regular basis. Open Up Show is a sharing of your personal life journey. Live talk shows on Sundays at 7 p.m. EST. Vili, a Tamil live talk show, is on Sundays at 8 a.m. EST. We have our monthly webinar, which is first Saturday of every month at 10 a.m. EST. We bring expertise in organizations to discuss a particular topic each time. We have our monthly special show, The Unspoken Tears, on second Saturday of every month from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. The focus is on domestic violence against men, bullying, male sexual abuse, trauma, porn addictions, and human trafficking. We have our author circle, where we bring in individuals who have been contributing to the well-being of boys and men through writing articles, media, and recognize them and appreciate them. Third Saturday of every month from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. EST. All of our shows are available on 6 platforms, including iPhone, Google Play, and so on. We also have our monthly men's group, only for men by men, each 2 weeks on Tuesdays from 6 to 7:30 p.m. through Zoom. We also have Past Talking Stick, which is an indigenous peer-to-peer support group. Again, there are no limitations with gender, age, nationality, or ethnic groups. All walks of life can participate. If you want to be a guest of any of our shows, um, please reach out to us. We would love to work with individuals, professionals, and organizations. Our phone number here is 226 289 8784. Email address is info@voiceofmen360.org. Website is voiceofmen360.org. You can find us on all social media, including Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Voice of Men 360. We want to reach out to more people and help the community more. Thank you for your support. And thank you.